Welcome to the deep dive. You know, today we're doing something a little different. We're going beyond just talking about values in education. We're really going to dive deep into how schools are putting those values into action, like actually weaving them into the daily lives of students.
Mhm.
You know, you sent us a chapter from an academic book that really gets into this.
Yes,
And honestly, it's pretty eye-opening.
it really is. It really challenges the traditional idea of what education should be. We're not just talking about academics.
Right.
We're talking about cultivating the whole person,
Yeah.
equipping them with the skills and mindsets they need, not just for, a job, but for a fulfilling life.
That's a big idea,
Yeah,
right? So the chapter uses this term deep implementation.
right.
What does that actually mean when we're talking about schools bringing values to life?
So it's about going way beyond lip service.
Yeah.
Think about it. Every school has a mission statement, posters on the wall, maybe even a character education class.
Yeah.
But deep implementation means those values aren't just decorations. They're woven into everything, from how teachers interact with students, to how the curriculum is designed, even to things like the school's feedback and discipline policies.
So it's not just about having a list of values, it's about making them part of the air students breathe.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
The chapter also uses this phrase, large learning ecosystem. And it's got me thinking about all the different influences that shape a student's experience.
Yeah. And that's exactly the point. It's recognizing that learning isn't confined to the classroom.
Right.
Students are learning from everything around them, from their peers, the school culture, even things that happen outside of school. And deep implementation means being intentional about how those different elements reinforce the values we're trying to instill.
It's like a holistic approach to education.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get specific. The chapter dives into these 9 universal competencies identified by the OECD.
Yes, Sam.
And it basically says that these are the building blocks of well-being. We've got things like reflection, collaboration, learning to learn, respect, responsibility. Honestly, at first glance, it reads like a pretty standard list of good character traits.
Yeah,
But the chapter goes deeper, right?
it does. What's fascinating is that the OECD isn't just saying these are nice qualities to have.
Right.
They've connected them to real-world outcomes, both in terms of academic success and overall well-being.
Give us an example. How does something like learning to learn, which sounds pretty abstract, actually translate into a kid doing better in school or life?
No. Okay, so think about it this way. Learning to learn is really about metacognition,
Go.
becoming aware of how you think and learn best.
Right.
Now, on a practical level, this can help a student figure out how to study more effectively for different subjects.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is that research suggests that the skill transfers. It's not just about better grades in math class.
Right.
It's about being able to adapt your approach to learning in any new situation, whether that's a new job, a hobby, or even just figuring out how to build that bookshelf from IKEA.
I see. So it's about giving them the skills to be adaptable learners throughout their lives.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these seemingly soft skills can have some real-world teeth. The chapter also highlights some specific programs schools are using to put these competencies into practice.
Right.
And 3 in particular stood out to me.
Yes, and they each offer a unique angle on this whole idea of weaving values into the school experience.
Yeah.
There's Guy Claxton's learning power approach, which he actually calls LPA.
LPA. Now, Claxton is a cognitive scientist.
Yes, he is.
And I was struck by his emphasis on what he calls non-intellectual forms of intelligence. What's he getting at there?
It's a bit of a challenge to the traditional view that intelligence is all about IQ and academic ability.
Okay.
Claxton argues that things like curiosity, imagination, resilience, even the ability to connect with others are just as important for learning and success in life.
So LPA isn't about throwing out academic rigor.
No, not at all.
It's about expanding our definition of what it means to be a capable learner.
Exactly. And the program provides schools with specific tools and strategies to help cultivate these often overlooked aspects of intelligence. Things like encouraging open-ended questioning, creating opportunities for collaboration, and even incorporating mindfulness practices into the school day.
So it's about giving students a much broader toolkit to approach learning and problem solving.
Precisely. Now, the second program the chapter mentions is Deborah Ayer's High Performance Learning, or HPL.
This one really intrigued me. They argue that every student has the potential for high performance given the right support.
Right.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is. And it challenges the idea that some kids are just naturally gifted while others aren't. HPL suggests that we can unlock high performance in any student by focusing on developing certain cognitive characteristics and nurturing specific values, attributes, and attitudes.
So instead of labeling kids, it's about figuring out what each individual needs to thrive. Do
Exact.
they give examples of what those supports might look like?
Absolutely. They have this framework of 7 pillars for high performance, things like developing a growth mindset, fostering a love of inquiry, building metacognitive skills,
Hmm.
and even cultivating values like resilience and collaboration.
Okay.
And they provide schools with practical strategies for weaving these pillars into everyday teaching and learning.
It's fascinating how HPL flips the script on our assumptions about potential. The third program the chapter dives into is Neil Hawke's Values-Based Education, or VBE.
Yes,
Now, this one seems to take a less technical approach
it does.
and really focus on the overall school culture.
That's right. VBE is less about specific techniques and more about creating a school environment where values like respect, empathy, and integrity are woven into the very fabric of how things are done.
They use this great example in the chapter. In a school that truly values respect, teachers wouldn't yell at students.
Right?
It's such a simple illustration, but it really drives the point home.
It does. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And VBE goes beyond just avoiding negative behaviors. It emphasizes actively modeling the desired values, developing a shared ethical vocabulary so everyone can talk about these things,
Right.
and empowering students to become leaders in promoting those values within the school community.
So it's about creating a culture where these values aren't just rules, they're guiding principles for how everyone interacts. Now we've got these 3 programs, each with its own approach. But what struck me is that they all seem to agree on one thing.
What's that?
Deep implementation is about more than just surface-level changes.
Absolutely. Whether it's through developing specific learning skills, creating a culture of high performance, or weaving values into the very air students breathe,
Right.
they all highlight that this is about a fundamental shift in how we approach education.
And that shift is no small feat. The chapter doesn't shy away from the challenges involved in making these kinds of changes.
Yeah.
It even brings up this multi-layered ecosystem framework, hinting at just how complex this all is. What's that all about?
Well, it's a way of understanding that change in a school doesn't happen in isolation.
Okay.
You've got the microsystem, which is like the individual classroom and the relationships within it. Then you've got the mesosystem, which is about how different parts of the school interact, like how the administration supports teachers or how different grade levels collaborate. And then there's the exosystem, which is the broader community context, things like family involvement, local resources, even societal attitudes towards education.
Whoa. When you lay it out like that, it really highlights just how many moving parts there are. It makes you realize that deep implementation isn't something you can just check off a list.
No.
It's an ongoing process.
It is. It's a process. And the chapter emphasizes that one of the biggest factors in all of this is teacher beliefs.
Makes sense.
Yeah. If a teacher doesn't truly believe in the value of, say, collaboration, they're probably not going to go out of their way to create collaborative learning experiences for their students.
So it's not just about giving teachers new strategies.
Right.
It's about addressing those deeper beliefs about what good teaching and learning look like.
Yeah, and those beliefs are shaped by a lot of different factors. You know, their own experiences as students, their training, the culture of the school.
Right. The chapter shares an interesting anecdote about a school leader who seemed to get this.
Yes. This leader recognized that change starts with supporting teachers. They focused on building on teachers' strengths, adopted this health-promoting school model, which emphasizes the well-being of everyone in the school community, and crucially, they gave teachers dedicated time for reflection and collaboration.
It sounds like they created a culture where teachers felt valued and empowered,
Yes,
which probably made them more open to trying new things.
exactly. It's not about top-down mandates. It's about creating a supportive environment where change can organically emerge.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
the chapter also talks about the importance of meeting students where they are, developmentally speaking.
Right.
They specifically highlight the IB learner profile. Can you give us a quick rundown of what that is?
Sure. The IB Learner Profile is a set of 10 attributes that the International Baccalaureate Program, which you might be familiar with, identifies as essential for lifelong learning.
Okay.
These are things like being inquirers, knowledgeable, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective.
Okay, that's a pretty comprehensive list.
It is.
But it sounds like it might be a bit much for, say, a first grader to grasp.
And that's exactly the point the chapter makes. They share this great example of an educator who took the IB learner profile and adapted it for a primary school setting. They simplified the language.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of knowledgeable, they used explorers. Instead of principled, they used respect.
I love that. It's taking these like lofty ideals and making them relatable to a 5-year-old.
Exactly. And they went even further, creating characters to represent each learning value.
Oh, wow.
So imagine instead of just saying be a communicator, you've got this friendly character named Chatter who embodies good communication skills.
That's awesome.
Kids can connect with that on a whole different level.
That's such a creative approach. It's not just about teaching kids a list of words. It's about bringing those values to life in a way that captures their imaginations.
Mm.
The chapter stresses that for this to really work, it can't just be a one-off lesson.
Right.
It's got to be woven into everything.
Exactly. The author calls for consistency across all learning areas. So it's not just about having a designated values class.
Right.
It's about those values being reflected in how math is taught, how the playground is managed, how parent-teacher conferences are conducted. It's about creating a cohesive experience where those values are constantly reinforced.
It's almost like those values become the school's DNA shaping everything it does. Now, to help schools think about how to organize all of this, the chapter introduces 3 key curriculum pillars.
Yes, these pillars provide a framework for bringing those values to life in a concrete way. The first is community, emphasizing the importance of building a sense of belonging and connection within the school. The second is metacognition, which we've already touched on, encouraging students to become aware of their own learning processes. And the third is values specifically focusing on global citizenship.
Global citizenship.
Yeah.
I like that. It's not just about being a good person within your own little bubble. It's about expanding that sense of responsibility outward. The chapter gives an example of how one school brought these pillars together.
They describe a Year 4 curriculum that focused on Nelson Mandela and the Long Walk to Freedom. Through this lens, students explored themes of social justice, resilience, and the power of individual action to create positive change.
It's amazing how a compelling story like that can make these abstract concepts come alive. And I'm betting it sparked some interesting discussions in those classrooms.
I'm sure it did. It's about connecting those values to real-world issues and inspiring students to see themselves as agents of change.
Now, we've been talking about all the positive aspects of this approach, but the chapter acknowledges that deep implementation isn't always easy. In fact, it straight up calls curriculum reform, which is essentially what we're talking about, is socially complex process. What are some of the hurdles schools might face?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that change takes time.
Sure.
It's not about implementing a program and expecting instant results. It's about shifting mindsets, building capacity, and creating a culture where these values are truly embedded. This requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to learn and adapt along the way.
So it's not a quick fix.
No.
It's a long game. And I imagine that can be frustrating for teachers and administrators who are eager to see results.
It can be. And it's important to acknowledge that there will be setbacks, resistance, and even outright failures along the way. But the key is to view those as learning opportunities to adjust course and to keep moving forward.
So resilience is key, not just for the students, but for the adults driving this change.
Exactly.
The chapter also hints at the importance of leadership in all of this.
Absolutely. Strong leadership is essential for creating a shared vision, providing support, and navigating the inevitable challenges that arise. The chapter gives that example of the school leader who prioritized teacher well-being and gave them time for reflection. That kind of supportive leadership creates a fertile ground for change to take root.
It's about creating a culture where teachers feel valued, trusted, and empowered to take risks.
Right.
Because, let's face it, trying to change the way you've always done things can be scary.
It can. And that's why having a leader who understands the complexities of this work and who can create a safe space for experimentation and even failure is so important.
Now, one of the things that keeps coming up for me is that this whole deep implementation thing seems to require a pretty significant shift in thinking, not just for educators, but for everyone involved.
You're right. It challenges a lot of traditional assumptions about what education should look like. We're moving away from a purely academic focus, where success is measured solely by test scores and grades. We're starting to recognize that educating the whole child means cultivating their character, their social emotional skills, their ability to think critically, and engage meaningfully with the world around them.
It's a bigger picture view of education.
Right.
And it makes you wonder how we assess success in this new model. If it's not just about test scores,
Right.
then what does it look like to measure things like empathy resilience or global citizenship?
That's a great question, and it's one that educators and researchers are still grappling with. Traditional assessment methods often fall short when it comes to measuring these more nuanced aspects of learning.
Yeah.
But there are some promising approaches emerging, things like portfolio assessments, project-based learning, and even the use of technology to track student growth in areas like collaboration and communication.
So we need to get more creative in how we measure
Yeah.
success.
We do. And it's exciting to think about the possibilities. We might start to see schools focusing more on developing students' portfolios of work that showcase their growth in these areas, or creating more authentic assessments that require students to apply their knowledge and skills to real-world problems.
It sounds like this could fundamentally change the way we think about a student's transcript.
Right.
Instead of just a list of grades, it can be a much richer representation of who they are as a learner and what they're capable of.
Exactly. It could become a much more holistic and meaningful reflection of their journey through education.
Now, the chapter focuses primarily on schools, but I can't help but think about how these ideas could apply to other areas of life as well.
Absolutely. These principles of deep implementation, of cultivating the whole person, of creating a learning ecosystem that supports well-being and growth, they're not limited to the classroom. They can be applied in families, communities, even workplaces.
Think about parenting, for example.
Hmm.
If we want to raise kids who are resilient, empathetic, and capable of navigating a complex world, we probably need to go beyond just setting rules and expecting obedience.
Right. It's about creating a home environment where those values are modeled and reinforced, where children feel safe to explore their emotions, take risks, and learn from their mistakes. It's about being intentional about the messages we send, both through our words and our actions.
And those messages are everywhere, aren't they? It's not just about what we say directly to our kids. It's about the books we read, the media we consume, the conversations we have around the dinner table. It's about creating a culture of learning and growth that permeates every aspect of family life.
Exactly. And that same principle applies to communities. If we want to build strong, resilient communities, we need to foster a sense of belonging, connection, and shared purpose. We need to create opportunities for people to come together, to learn from each other, and to work together to address the challenges we face.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of our communities.
Exactly. And I think these ideas have powerful implications for the workplace as well. We're starting to see a shift away from the traditional hierarchical model of leadership, where the boss dictates and the employees follow. There's a growing recognition that creating a more collaborative, supportive, and values-driven workplace culture not only benefits employees, it also leads to greater productivity and innovation.
So it's not just about being nice. It's about creating an environment where people can thrive,
Yes,
both personally and professionally.
precisely. And when people feel valued and supported, when they have a sense of purpose in their work, they're more likely to be engaged, motivated, and ultimately more successful.
It's amazing how these principles, which we've been exploring through the lens of education, can be applied so broadly. It really highlights the fact that learning isn't confined to the classroom. It's a lifelong journey that takes place in all areas of our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really empowering message. It means that we all have the capacity to learn to grow and to create positive change no matter where we are or what we do.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about. It's challenged my assumptions about education leadership and even the nature of learning itself.
It has been a fascinating exploration, and I think we've only just scratched the surface of this important topic.
I agree. And that's the beauty of it. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, being open to new possibilities, and embracing the journey of lifelong learning.
Well said. I think that's a great place to leave our listeners. What are your thoughts on how we can best equip young people, not just for the workforce, but for life itself? We'd love to hear your reflections on social media.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll be back next week with another fascinating deep dive. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to make the world a little bit better, one conversation at a time.